Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast where we explore all things cinema. I want to welcome back to the show Nat Segaloff, who is a writer, producer, journalist, and Hugo and Locus Award nominated author of more than 24 books about filmmakers and film history. He's written extensively about the film industry and worked on A&E's flagship biography series, as well as programming for the Learning Channel, New World, Disney, Turner Classic Movies, and USA Network. And today we are talking about one of his recent books, The Exorcist Legacy, 50 Years of Fear, which is a wonderful read. Nat, welcome back. Thanks for joining me again.
Thank you, Robert. It is a pleasure to be back.
It's a pleasure to have you. And I love the book. Again, it's just like your Scarface book, which I have here as well, which we talked about last month. Another page turner, and I really actually I mean this as a compliment, that after I read your books, I often have to really search for things to ask, and the reason I say that is because you write things in such detail, but with such a way of such a simplicity and accessible way for the reader that after the end, I felt you touch on so many things in such great, again, detail, but also these great summaries that sometimes I'm at a loss for questions because there's so much that you unpack in these books. So I must compliment you on that.
Well, thank you. I have a very indulgent editor and publisher, and they let me write this stuff. And they also make sure, with the Exorcist book, I had a kind of a spiritual fact checker. There's a man named Mark Kermode, Kermode, who is the chief critic in England. And he's an Exorcist scholar. He thinks it's the best movie ever made. He's seen it over 200 times. And not only is he an old friend, but he also kind of looked at the book and made sure I didn't go off the rails. So he's kind of my rabbi, pardon the expression, with an Exorcist book. But Mark is a good friend, and I think we've hit it with this book. I think we really have.
Well, I felt, I completely agree. And I was curious, when you were researching and reading about demonic possession, are you having nightmares? Are you having demons visit you in the night, or what's that like?
No, I haven't been visited in the night by demons, not even a succubus. I've been visited by nightmares from not getting enough sleep. But no, the film never really scared me because I read the book and knew what to expect, and the book didn't scare me because I was holding on to it as a physical thing. I guess I felt the comfort of the printed page. But when I finally saw the movie, there's a couple of interesting, not really shocks, but things you turn your head away from the screen, such as the famous arteriogram sequence I want to go into. But it has a power on the audience that I admire so much because it just was unlike any other movie that was made up to that point, horror movie or otherwise. And it really grabbed people and didn't let go for 2 hours and 1 minute.
Right. Yeah. Well, that scene you just mentioned, because I had read, or heard about over the years that people would throw up, but I did not know that it was at the point you just mentioned, which is when I don't know exactly that procedure that they were doing to her, where you see the blood come out of her neck, the doctors, what do you call that?
It's called an arteriogram. It's where they insert a dye into the system so they can see the flow of blood. Notice that there are brain lesions. That and CAT scans and PET scans are also used, and we see that in the film too. But it was a clinically accurate procedure that director William Friedkin used. And I guess people can relate more to pricking their finger than they can to get their heads cut off in a horror film. And that will run up the aisles. Not the girl's throat swelling up, not the head turning around, or even the pea soup.
Right. That's interesting. I wouldn't have expected that. I would have thought it would be what a couple of those things you just mentioned. But yeah, like you said, it's there's something about like the prick of a finger or a little, a needle or blood that can really make people squeamish. What made you, this is a common question I know authors get, but what made you want to do this book? What was it about not only The Exorcist, but the sequels, the prequels, and the TV series? What was it that made you want to dive in here?
If you're going to do The Exorcist, you got to do the whole thing, in for a foot, in for a mile. But first, publishers have an affinity for movie books that remark on an anniversary, a nice round number anniversary. And The Exorcist was certainly part of it. But also The Exorcist, this book was kind of, if you'll pardon the expression, an exorcism for me, because I was one of the small-time publicists who handled the original release of the film in 1973. It was in a Boston theater, and my job was to stand outside the theater and keep anybody from wandering into the screening who wasn't invited, because director William Friedkin had given us permission to show it the day before its opening. It opened on Boxing Day on December 26, 1973. And if your calendar is anywhere in mind, the day before Boxing Day is Christmas. So you can imagine hosting a screening of The Exorcist for the Boston critics in Catholic Boston on Christmas morning. And
well, it is a religious film in a way, so it does.
Thank you for saying that. Not a whole lot of people truly understand. It's a very religious film. In fact, it sent people.
Yeah.
It really did. It was. Some of the churches were kind of rocky with it, but by and large, it does reaffirm people's faith. That's what it is, really. It was written by a Jesuit scholar who wants to reaffirm the existence of God.
Right.
Yeah. Kind of toward that.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I've always loved the film. And one thing that you touched on, which I didn't know, was that people were often confused about the ending. They thought the demon had thrown Karis out the window. And I was surprised to hear that, because it had always made sense to me. And you see him possessed, and you see him suddenly not possessed. I always understood that he obviously shook the demon out of him and then sacrificed himself to save the girl. Then again, I was brought up Catholic. Maybe it's a little easier for me to understand that. Do you think that maybe do you think that people who maybe have brought up in certain faith can understand that better than, let's say, an atheist or an agnostic, or I don't know what you feel, why people have felt that was confusing? It always made sense to me.
The holiness of sacrificing oneself for someone else is, I think, more of a Catholic tenet, but by and large, I think it's an emotional one that most people can relate to. What I think makes the film's ending so confusing for some people is that it isn't in the book. What happens in the book is that Sharon and Chris are downstairs having coffee or whatever when they hear the commotion upstairs. Well, they couldn't have it off screen for the movie, so Blatty and Friedkin had to put it into the film. And that's where we have Father Karras going, come into me, take me. Right. And then you see from the application of the makeup on and off that although he is not possessed when he jumps out the window.
Yes, that's right.
That's still his decision as a rational human being, not as a possessed human being. And so, Pazuzu didn't make him jump out the window. He jumped out the window of his own free will. And thirdly, again, sacrificing your life to save the life of somebody else. And mind you, he'd never met Reagan. He'd only met the demon. To sacrifice your life for a stranger is just a remarkable, remarkable feat.
Yes. Oh, I completely agree. And I remember watching it again a few years ago because I reviewed it on my show. And I'd seen it a couple of times in the past. And I was, really like, this film is really about the priest in a lot of ways and about his struggles and his loss of faith. And I was like, wow, this is, it's a very, like we were saying, very religious film. And then on the flip side, of course, we have the mother who will, like you wrote about in the book, the mother who will do anything to save her child. So it's so human, and so I think very relatable in a lot of ways. And like you talked about in the book, the fact that Friedkin approached it in a more of a documentary fashion, I think is why it's so, as you said in the book, why it's so scary and why it's sort of transcends the genre of being not just merely horror, but sort of a very, spiritual and human film. I mean, I believe you agree. I think you've said that you felt that it's not really a horror film purely. Do you see it as transcending that genre?
There's only one jump scare in the whole film, and that's when Chris is in the attic with a candle and it flares up because Carl opens the door and lets in air. Otherwise, the film just gnaws at you, and I think it transcends the genre. But of course, Friedkin and Blatty say they never set out to make a horror film. They set out to make a film about the mystery of faith, and Blatty often referred to it as supernatural detective story because there are so many plot lines going through the movie, which is very rare. In fact, there's even more plot lines in the book. But, in the Exorcist movie, you've got The demon is after a priest. He's also after a priest that he worked with years ago and who exorcised him. You've got a priest who's lost his faith. You've got a mother protecting your child. You've got a detective looking for a killer. You've got all
Yes.
kinds of stories, and they're all personified with perfect acting and beautiful casting. And that's why The Exorcist, I think, affects people, because there's a human value in it that you can relate to, no matter who
Yeah.
you are in the audience.
Yes, I completely agree. And the 2000 version that came out, I know, you talked about this in the book, in the year 2000. For anyone who doesn't know, Friedkin and Blatty added some things that Blatty felt strongly about that should have been in the one when it came out in 73, and Friedkin put certain things in the year 2000. Do you have a preference between the two versions?
They added the footage not only to please Bill Blatty, but also to get another theatrical release out of the film and another set of videos that all the complete had to buy. Like most people, I'm not a terribly big fan of the version you never saw or the other versions of it, except for the addition of what's called the stairwell scene, which in exorcisms, Karras and Blatty, Karras and Marin are on the stairs of the McNeil house, and Karras says, "Why this girl? Why go after this girl?" And Father Marin says, "Because the demon is not going after the girl. The demon is going after us. Wants us to ask ourselves, how can anybody as vile and putrid as human beings are possibly be loved by God?" Right. Now, he also wanted the ending. And by the way, we're so far past spoilers during this interview. Let's just...
Yeah, no, we're all spoilers here. Don't worry about that.
I haven't seen it by now. It's all over.
Yeah.
They wanted to have Kinderman show up at the McNeil house after Father Bill O'Malley has been there, Father Dyer, and as it is now in the film, Dyer looks down the Exorcist stairs and then walks away.
Yeah.
Originally, he was supposed to be intercepted by Kinderman, who asked him the same questions he asked Father Karras. "You like movies, Father? Do you like to go out? I get all these classes." And it was the ending for Casablanca. Louis, this is the beginning of a beautiful friend. But when they tried to restore that footage, they didn't have the field recording. All they had was a traffic recording and background noise. And since Lee J. Cobb, who played Kinderman, had died, they really couldn't loop it or find a sound alike. So they just ended it the way it was, kind of. It also sets Exorcist 3 up, by the way, on a wrong note, because in Exorcist 3, Kinderman and Dyer are very close friends.
Yes,
but in Exorcist, they never meet. And so we have to, fill in the blanks when we go into Exorcist 3, which is the second best Exorcist film.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I felt that scene, because I watched both versions again. It's, by the way, it's amazing what adding a couple of things can do. It can just change so much and add so much. And I agree that staircase on the scene, I think Blatty was right about that, because the audience doesn't really understand. I mean, how can we possibly understand the motive behind a demon? Because you can't, right? So the priest needed to sort of spell that out for that to come, to have understood why the demon was there. That the whole thing about faith being what wins out over the evil, like that the demon's there not just to possess a girl for no reason, but to, like you said, to make people question heaven and make people think that heaven is God doesn't love you and things like that. Yeah. I think that was essential. I think I don't know why Friedkin would have taken that out.
Well, I don't know. The film was running along, I guess, but Blatty approved the work print where all these scenes were in, and then Billy decided to cut it out. Partly because some of the people at Warner Brothers suggested it was maybe too much. Just you got to make it move faster. Also, Friedkin, like a lot of directors, is terribly vulnerable during the editing process, because you spend all this money and all this time on a film and you really don't know what's going to work. And a lot of times you have a couple of test screenings, and it may be the height of arrogance to think that you have it right in the first cut. Billy was never short of arrogance, but they didn't have a chance to test screen The Exorcist, really, and they had to go with their gut. They were 99% correct. I'll tell you something, and nobody's asked this, so I'm going to blow it here. It's in the book. There was an ending that Blatty wanted to put on the movie even before they started talking. This was right after it came out. He felt unsatisfied that people were not understanding the ending where Karras jumps out the window. He said it would cost $300,000 to shoot it, so they never did. But in Blatty's own personal ending, which he revealed to us for the first time in the book, is that you have Father Dyer is jogging or exercising sometime after the whole story has been over. And all of a sudden, another jogger is jogging with him. And they have a slight conversation, and Dyer realizes there's something changing. This jogger is not a normal jogger. In fact, it's Karras's spirit.
Yes, that's right.
I get really, really jammed up about this. And he says, "Don't you understand, Joe? We're the light." And you pan up, and the sky, the daylight sky, is full of stars. Well, it would have cost him too much to do it, but isn't that a wonderful ending that would really cement everything and be very spiritual as well?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, I think so, because the 73 version just ending on the priest looking up at the window, which is now all blocked off, of course. It does give you not so much the impression that the demon won because the girl has been saved, but it doesn't quite feel like anyone won. But by extending it, at least what we have in the 2000 version and what you also described, that the point comes through more that that they beat the demon out, that their faith and love is what drove the demon away. So yeah,
if you believe in possession anyway, I mean, there aren't rules, no matter what the Roman ritual says. It's there's no proof of any of this stuff. Most of it is just, including the original cases, no proof. But there are certain rules. For example, who says that the demon couldn't repossess Reagan?
Well, that's the other. Yeah, I never went that far in that thinking, but I can see how people would.
He's a demon. He can do what he wants to. That's the whole point. Does he go off into demon land somewhere and then come back? Does another demon tag team and come back in there? But it works.
Yeah. No, I agree. I never even thought of that. I could see how people would think, well, why doesn't the demon just go back? And I started to go down that rabbit hole, and I thought, well, I mean, this is not supposed to be real. We're not supposed to be looking at this so realistically. It's about the essence and the feelings, and thematically, it's so strong that I never even question such a thing. You just earlier brought up the Exorcist 3 as being the second best sequel, which I agree. I had never seen part 2 before, and I watched it recently. I thought it was so awful. I was surprised that Scorsese likes it so much. I thought, how could he like this? And as you said in the book, it was made by a filmmaker who didn't think the first one should even be made, which should have been a red flag. But everything with these bugs and all this stuff, it was so confusing and so silly. I just thought it was absolutely awful. So terrible.
The premise of The Heretic, Exorcist 2, is that true, pure good attracts evil, and therefore Reagan was good because she attracted evil, which of course defeats the whole purpose of the original. Reagan was just a vessel in the original one, but here now she's supposed to be the linchpin of the whole thing. It's an unfortunate film, as beautiful as it is. John Borman, who does not have a very close relationship with continuity, may have overreached his abilities on the film. There is, however, a documentary that is now in post-production about The Heretic.
Oh, really?
But it's a friend of mine is editing it, and it should be interesting when it eventually comes out. I don't know what it's called, but it is about The Heretic.
Okay, well, maybe I'll see it. But I did not think it was going to be that bad. I was like, wow, this is.
You have no idea. Yeah, no.
It was so terrible. And I watched part 3 again. I saw it about a decade ago, and I remember liking it a lot. I did like it, but I didn't think it was that great. Again, the whole thing of Karras's soul being possessed by another serial killer who died the same night, and then Pazuzu is putting that person's soul in Karras, and now I just thought it was so it was just so far out there. Whereas what I like about the first one is that it feels that it could happen. That's why it's so scary. Whereas the third feels like it just feels way too out there for me. It's certainly got some great things in it, but I wasn't as it didn't sit well. I don't know how you feel about it.
It has one of the greatest jump scares in all of cinema, and I will not describe it now.
Oh, the scissors.
you know the one?
Yes, that's a great scene.
It was based on William Peter Blatty's official sequel to the book The Exorcist, which was titled Legion. And it was scripted by him. He decided to direct it himself. It's a very well done film, but the people behind it, Morgan Creek Productions, didn't like it. Even though they'd read the script and knew what they were going to get, they said, look, an exorcism film has to have an exorcism in it.
Right.
Reshoot and add a whole subplot involving actor Nicole Williamson. Which,
yeah, I didn't like that either. And he just went there on a premonition to do this Exorcist. I thought, come on.
It doesn't but it works philosophically, but I think dramatically there's a problem. So Bill Blatty and Mark Kermode, again, were able to rescue Blatty's original cut, which is called Legion. And if you buy the DVD and Blu-ray that are put out by the Shout Factory, Scream Factory, you'll see both versions on there with commentary tracks.
Yeah, I've only seen the theatrical. I'll have to see the other one.
It is. Now, they had to reconstruct the deleted footage using VHS tapes because those are the screeners that are sent to various people on the production chain to check how the footage is going. So the quality isn't very good, but the continuity is much better. And you see more of a performance by Brad Dourif, who is
he was great.
In the cut version. And it makes a lot more sense.
Yes, because I didn't know that story you told was that the reason. Why is the actor who plays Karras' name escaping me now?
Jason Miller.
Jason Miller. I didn't realize that he became an alcoholic and couldn't remember his lines very well, and so now that I know that when you watch the film, it almost made me laugh when suddenly it's Brad Dourif and then it's suddenly him. And I just thought, I don't even remember that from when I saw it 10 years ago, but it's odd. It's very strange that we have these two.
It's a distraction. It really is.
It really is. Yeah.
The reshoots, and they were able to coach him through the reshoots. It's a shame because he was a troubled man, but a brilliant writer. I mean, he won the Pulitzer Prize for writing the play that
championship season. Yes.
Fine actor, and he just, things happen to people.
Right. Yeah, no, it really is. And he's so wonderful in the first one. You also, again, we talked about all these movies, they have different cuts. And then there's also the TV series and one movie I've been meaning to watch, which is based on one of his other books, the Ninth Configuration.
Oh, yeah.
How do you feel about that one? I haven't seen it, but I've heard it's pretty good.
It's remarkable. It's based on Blatty's original novel, Twinkle, Twinkle, Killer Kane, which was republished with some changes and called The Ninth Configuration. The Ninth Configuration comes from the arrangement of atoms in the carbon molecule, which are required for the existence of life. And Blatty says, if you take this and you look at the fate by which all of these molecules came together to create life, it's like 1 in a gazillion billion. He said it's much easier to believe in God. Well, the Ninth Configuration is his trilogy of faith between the Exorcist Legion and Ninth Configuration, which show how human sacrifice, it shows the holiness of your commitment to people. And it's a beautifully heartfelt film and very funny. I mean, Blatty was a comedy writer. You got to remember.
I forgot about that.
He wrote A Shot in the Dark. He wrote John Goldfarb, Please Come Home. These are, wonderfully funny films. And he infused the Ninth Configuration with a great deal of weird humor, which you're not really ready for, but it's there. It's hard to find the film. It went through a number of different distributors and owners and versions. But if you really want to enjoy it, read the book, The Ninth Configuration, because that'll prepare you for the movie. You really should see it. It's kind of hard to find, but you can see it.
Yeah, I'll have to try to find it. It was on the Criterion Channel a few years ago. I'll have to see if it's still there. It may, I'm not sure, but I'll have to try to find that. You also wrote a biography on William Friedkin in 1990. What was he? He's such a fascinating person to me. I can watch him in interviews all day. He is so engaging. He could just have had a career giving speeches, I think. I mean, he is such a funny, passionate, straight shooter. I love the way he talks. What was he like? I mean, I know that's a large question, but just, could you tell us a little bit about your impression of his personality? Is he like as he is in interviews to an extent, or?
Well, I miss him greatly because he was certainly one of the most fascinating people I'd ever known. Billy Friedkin was one of those people who, in an appreciation in the New York Times, when they have a shirt tail at the end, They would say, you know, William Friedkin is the director of so and so. With him, they would say William Friedkin is, well, William Friedkin. I mean, that's the kind of person he was. Now,
Right.
I met him when he called us when I was the junior publicist handling part of The Exorcist in Boston in 1973. We were indicted by the Commonwealth of
Oh
Massachusetts
yes, yes, you
by
wrote
a
about that in the
crazy
book.
religious nut for blasphemy, obscenity, and corrupting the morals of a minor. When it broke, Billy called the office and he spoke to me and said, listen, you got to fight these people. Well, we got to meet each other on the phone. And then when he did a lecture tour, and later on we linked up and just kept on running into each other over the years. And I would write a story about him when I was a reporter, and we go back and forth. And finally, in 1988, I asked him, listen, can I write your biography? He said, sure. I mean, that was the deal. We didn't have a handshake. It was on the phone. And he was true to his word. He made things available to me. He was accessible. And he thought the result, which was called Hurricane Billy, and it came out from William Morrow and Company in 1990, he thought it was respectful, which it certainly was. But it was at a time when he was at the kind of a nadir of his career. He had made all these great films, but he'd also made Sorcerer in 1977.
Right.
And at this point in 1988 was directing TV movies for NBC, which
Right.
he, always a cheerleader about things, said he would love to keep on doing forever. But we all knew that things were a bit tight. He then, you know, made a comeback with To Live and Die in LA and all of that. Wonderful.
Oh yeah,
Which
yeah,
is
really
probably the
good.
fourth greatest film he ever made. But at the time, he was very vulnerable. And although he was known for shining other people on and making fun of people and whatever, he never lied to me. He never stood me up. He never betrayed me. He always was open. He was a wonderful, wonderful friend and a terrific director. And you know, we weren't like bosom buddies hanging around. I did the book. We saw each other over the years, and that was it. And then he went into decline, unfortunately,
Mm,
with his health, and we lost him in last year.
yeah. Did he know you were doing this book? Well, no, actually, yeah, because it
No.
came out before he died, because it came out in
Oh
July,
yeah,
this book, right?
yeah. But
Okay.
I told him I'd written it after I wrote it for a very strange reason. Billy, as a good fabulist and fantasist and storyteller, had a tendency to revise his stories. And
Oh,
some of the stories that I got from him, all of the stories I got from him, were vintage 1988, at a time when The Exorcist was just a hit. It wasn't yet a classic. Some of his
right.
stories changed over the years as he managed to invent on them. And I didn't want to have to print both versions of a story. I wanted to go with the original ones. And then that's what I did.
Ah, I see. I'll have to read that book someday. I read his memoir when it came out, and I
Yeah.
loved his memoir.
It's a wonderful, it's called The Friedkin Connection. I think HarperCollins had. It's one of
Yeah.
those books by a director who not only is a good writer, but you actually feel the joy and the fun of filmmaking.
Yes, 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 absolutely. And he was something else. I mean, such a tough guy at the same. It just was so brave. At the things he did, and I admire just the way he answers questions. It just, I mean, he's very kind, but he can also just be very harsh all of a sudden. Like when there was an interview where they were asking him about Pacino, you know, they didn't work very well on Cruising, and he just cut the interviewer off and said, "I don't give a fuck about what Al Pacino thinks," and just with a straight face. And you know, I mean, wow, what a personality! He'll surely be missed. You know,
Yes, yes. Our last encounter was memorable, and I won't write about that for a long time. I bumped into him in a restaurant.
ah,
Interesting, sitting about 5 feet away from Al Pacino.
oh,
That's
well, that's a
that's a
story.
long
You gotta
story that I will not go
one
into.
day. One
One day,
day you can tell it.
right.
Hopefully here you can tell it here for the first time.
As Mae West
Yeah,
said, keep a good diary, and someday it will keep you.
there you go. There you go. I'd love to hear that one day. You also interviewed Blatty when you did that book, and that interview is in your book here. I love the fact that he was concerned about the fact that you had an 8 and he made you a sandwich, which is, how was that sandwich, by the way?
The ham sandwich the perfect thing for an Arab to serve a Jew.
There you go.
No, it is just he's a thoughtful, he was, meaning no disrespect, he was what we would call an old lady, in the sense of he was concerned about other people. He was worried about details. You know, I sent him a transcript of the interview. This is back in '88, our first interview. And he crossed a bunch of things out. by saying, "Please don't print this, Nat. I have enough troubles."
Right. You see it. That's right.
I was able to restore all that because his troubles are over. He passed away in 2017, and it's some of the most insightful material that we ever had.
Oh, wow. And then I understand you're in touch with his family, I believe, still, or
I'm in touch with his son, Michael, who is certainly his father's guardian and protector in that sense. We have a wonderful relationship. He is so much fun, has his father's sense of humor, and it's just a wonderful bunch of people. So life goes on.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I wanted to touch a little bit about all these things. I had seen a documentary on this in the past, all the things that happened on the set. You know, the set went on fire. Jason Miller's son, I believe, got into an accident. One of the actors died right after, and his character died in the film. The actor who plays the director of the film within the film. All it's so, you know, bizarre that these things happen on a film about demonic possession. And I like that you interviewed Ellen Burstyn about that, and you know what people think was at play here. I was curious your own opinion. Are these a series of coincidences, or is there something, you know, fishy going on there that, you know, we cannot really know about, if anything, about demons you know, haunting the set?
Well, my standard line is the only curse of The Exorcist is that none of the prequels or sequels has made any money. But
Right.
to speak to some of the points, Ellen Burstyn is a very spiritual woman. I think she's our finest American actress.
Oh yeah, she's so good.
And she believes a lot of these things happen because of some very bad feelings that were going on. In fact, if you take 500 people working on all aspects of a movie over the 3 years it takes to get the movie made, they and their families and their friends, statistically, a lot of shit is going to happen. But
Yeah, well, that's a good point.
because it's The Exorcist, you know, I'm sure some things happened on Top Gun too, but nobody talks about that.
Right,
The
right.
Exorcist, however, is a kind of a magnet for this kind of speculation. I don't know. I talked to Terry Donnelly, who was an old friend and the production manager on the film, the chief assistant director of production, and he said, you know, these things happen. I mean, a lot of people are involved, so statistics will speak. If it helps burnish the reputation of the film, and if it helps people see it with that in mind, go for it.
Right, right. And you also talk a lot about you know, faith and religion towards the end of the book, which I found really interesting. I listened to your interview with my friend Mike White on the Projection Booth podcast, and he had asked you if you have any, you know, religious beliefs yourself, and you had said you didn't. But I was curious if that you don't. I was curious, did your, you know, research into religion in this film change any of your, you know, perspectives on the nature of faith at all?
Well, I am what my partial namesake Nat Hantoff calls a Jewish atheist.
Right.
Go parse that one if you want to. My feelings about religion are that it was created by the devil. Now, the existence of God is a whole separate thing from religion. I don't think God believes in religion either, if there is a God. But I think that the organization of faith and the exploitation of people, especially people's fears and ignorance, is a terrible thing. And a lot of what's happened in the history of the world has been because somebody believes in the wrong God.
Yeah, I agree.
It's better off just to ignore the whole thing and to believe in humans.
Right, right. Yeah, well said. Well said. Simple and specific, right? Just like the book. Who, like, again, I love the way you write, because I'm in awe of how much you pack in such a accessible and specific and detailed way. So again, if people are interested, if you love the movie or any of the sequels or prequels or TV series, you'll certainly love the book, because it's a real page turner. So Nat, thank you again for coming back so soon to discuss one of your other books. We discussed your Scarface book. I'll just plug it here for you. A few weeks ago, and I'll
pleasure. And thank you. And here's the other one that's come out already. I'm taking every opportunity to plug my books. This is
and I got this one here as well.
So
which I'm going to read.
That. Meanwhile, have a wonderful, wonderful 2024. Don't let it get to you.
Yes, you as well. And just lastly, just before you go, if people want to follow what you're up to, where's the best place for them to go?
I communicate with people mostly by rumor. To quote a Herb Gardner line, I have a website, but I keep on forgetting to update it because I'm too busy writing books. I can either be a writer who writes books or a writer who answers email and goes on websites. And so I just look around. I'm sure something will break. Certainly people will look at your podcast and you'll know something about me.
There we go. Well, I'll leave the link for your website in the description box below if people want to check out your website, as well as the interview we did on Scarface. And I know you'll be back soon because we're going to talk about your the Breaking the Code, the Preminger Hollywood Censors. So I'm looking forward to that. So Nat, thank you again, and look forward to having you back soon.
Thank you so much, Robert. See you soon.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link, patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. Patreon is exclusive content that I create month in and month out. And as a subscriber, you are able to vote on polls and contribute to what I do on Patreon month in and month out. So head over to the link for full details. You can also leave a donation directly to my YouTube channel by pressing the thanks link, which you will find directly below the video frame. Just click on the thanks link and you can leave a donation there if you choose to. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so. By pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo, you will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left. In just a second, just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes. Also click the like button and leave a comment below. Let me know what you think of this episode. Also, you can also share the episode. All of these things are what produce traction to my YouTube channel. So I appreciate you watching and thank you again. And I will see you in the next episode.